On my wedding day, my fiancé ran away with my sister, but the priest revealed something even worse. If you love stories like this, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. What was supposed to be the happiest day of my life turned into the worst nightmare I could ever imagine. There I was, dressed as a bride, with all eyes on me, anxiously waiting for the moment when the church doors would open and he would walk in. But the minutes passed, and nothing. At first, I thought it was just a silly delay, maybe a problem with the car or traffic. I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. But then, I noticed the worried look spreading among the guests. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My mother avoided looking at me. That's when one of the groomsmen approached, his face pale, an expression that sent a chill down my spine. "He's not coming," he murmured, barely audible. My head spun. What? What do you mean he's not coming? And then, as if fate wanted to completely destroy me, my phone vibrated inside the bouquet I was gripping so tightly that my fingers ached. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. One message. Just one. "Forgive me, but I can't. I love her." It took me a few seconds to process, but when I did, it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. It wasn't just that he had run away. It was with her. My sister. My vision blurred, and the silence in the church became an unbearable weight. I wanted to scream, cry, disappear. But before I could do anything, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was the priest. And in a low, serious voice, he said something that made me forget about the betrayal. Something that made me realize that this wedding wasn't just a mistake. It was a lie. "We need to talk. Now." I couldn't breathe. My eyes were glued to that message, as if reading those words over and over again could somehow change their meaning. My fiancé, my sister, together. The weight of humiliation hit me like a direct blow, and my entire body tensed, ready to collapse right there in front of everyone. But the priest's hand on my shoulder pulled me back. His gaze wasn't one of pity, like the others. It was urgent. "We need to talk. Now." I had no strength to respond. I just nodded and followed him in silence, trying to ignore the murmurs of the guests and their shocked, curious stares. With each step I took towards the sacristy, I felt like I was walking away from the woman I had been before entering that church. The priest closed the door behind us and sighed, as if about to unload a burden he had carried for too long. "I know this moment is already painful for you," he began, choosing his words carefully. "But there's something you need to know." "What could be worse than this?" My voice came out weak, full of bitterness. The priest hesitated. I saw his fingers intertwine, his aged face marked with conflict. And then, he said something that made my stomach drop. "This wedding, it could never have happened." My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" "There's something about your family, about your past, that has been kept a secret. But now that he's run away with your sister, I can't hide it from you any longer." My skin prickled. I no longer knew if I was shaking from anger, fear, or despair. "Just tell me." The priest took a deep breath and then dropped the bombshell. "Your fiancé, he's not who you think he is." My mind reeled. First, I was left at the altar. Then, I was betrayed by my own sister. And now, this? "What are you talking about?" My voice trembled. "The man you almost married, he has a blood tie to your family, a tie that has been hidden for years." My eyes widened. My body froze. "Are you saying that?" "Yes. He is your half-brother." The air vanished from my lungs. A ringing filled my ears, and my hands started sweating cold. This can't be true." My voice was barely a whisper. "I wish it weren't, but it is. Your father had a relationship in the past, before marrying your mother. Your fiancé is the result of that relationship, but this story was buried to protect the family's reputation." My knees gave out. I leaned on the table beside me, trying to process the absurdity of it all. Everything. All that love, The plans, the dreams, all a lie. And then a new wave of horror hit me. My sister. Does he know? I asked, my throat tightening. The priest hesitated. I'm not sure, but someone knew. Someone did everything to keep this a secret. My mind started racing. Who else knew? My parents, another relative. Pain and humiliation began to give way to something darker, a burning need for answers. If my father had hidden this for so long, how many more secrets were there? And most importantly, if he and my sister ran away together, did she know? I have to go. My voice came out firm, even surprising myself. The priest looked at me with a mix of concern and sympathy. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. Find out the whole truth, even if I have to destroy everyone involved. I walked out of the sacristy as if in a trance. The world around me felt distant, the curious faces of the guests blending into a shapeless blur. I was no longer the betrayed bride who had been abandoned at the altar. Now I was someone consumed by an insatiable need for answers. My first instinct was to look for my father. He was sitting in the front pew, his head down, fingers intertwined as if in prayer. But as I approached, he lifted his eyes, and I saw something that made me shiver. Guilt. He already knew. You knew. My voice was quiet, but sharp. You knew the whole time. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if bracing himself for the inevitable. We'll talk at home, he said, standing up. No, we'll talk now. Right here, in front of everyone. Just like I was humiliated in front of everyone. A murmur spread through the church. My mother stood up, trying to intervene. Sweetheart, please. Don't call me that. My voice was louder than I expected. My body wasn't shaking from sadness anymore. It was from rage. My father let out a long sigh. He knew there was no way out. Then, he looked around, as if searching for strength somewhere, before finally admitting, yes, I knew. A louder gasp rippled through the guests. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others looked at me as if I was about to collapse at any moment, but I wouldn't. You lied to me my whole life. My hands clenched into fists. You let me believe I was going to marry a man who is my half-brother. My mother began crying softly. My father lowered his head. It was a mistake. His voice was heavy. A mistake from the past that I tried to fix. I never wanted you to find out like this. I let out a bitter laugh. You really think that matters now? The worst part is I could have made an even bigger mistake. We could have gotten married, built a life together, and all because you hid the truth. My father ran a hand over his face, visibly shaken, but I had no compassion left to give. And then a new wave of horror hit me. What about my sister? Did she know? My father hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. You've got to be kidding me. My voice was pure venom. He didn't have to answer. I already knew. My sister knew. She had always known. The shock hit me like a slap to the face. She had stood by my side the whole time, listening to me talk about him, about the wedding, about our plans, and she never said a word. And yet she still ran away with him. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had used me. My breathing grew heavy. I wasn't going to stand there, surrounded by people whispering about my life like it was a spectacle. This wasn't my wedding anymore. It was my trial. We're done here. My words were cold, final. I left my father standing there, drowning in his own guilt, and walked out of the church. The way home was a blur. I only realized I had arrived when I found myself standing in front of the massive wooden doors. I walked in without hesitation. My family's mansion, which had always felt warm, now seemed cold, filled with shadows I had never noticed before. I headed straight for my sister's room. The moment I stepped inside, I could still smell her perfume lingering in the air. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Clothes tossed on the chair, shoes scattered on the floor. But what really caught my attention was the open drawer in her desk. I moved closer, as if already sensing something was about to hit me hard, and that's exactly what happened. There were letters. Love letters. My hands shook as I picked up the first one. The paper was thick, expensive, the handwriting unmistakable. My love, I know this is wrong, but I can't hide what I feel anymore. Every night I think about you, and every time I hear your sister talk about the wedding, I feel more suffocated. I should never have proposed to her. It was a mistake. You are the woman I love. The air left my lungs. There were more letters, and they all said the same thing. They had been together for months, maybe years. And me? I was just a shield, a distraction so no one would suspect. A deep, burning rage spread through me. I had to find them. Now. I stormed back to the living room and grabbed the phone. I heard my mother rush down the stairs, her face still stained with tears. "What are you doing?" She looked terrified. "Calling her." Her eyes widened. "Don't do this." I ignored her and dialed my sister's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. And then, she answered. "Hey, sis." Her voice sounded hesitant, almost guilty. I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the explosion inside me. "Where are you?" Silence. "I just want to understand," I continued, forcing my anger down. "You owe me that much." She took a deep breath. "I can't tell you. Can't or won't." More silence. And then, finally, she said something that sent ice through my veins. "I can't because we didn't plan this. My whole body went rigid." "What do you mean?" "I swear it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Someone helped us. Someone who knew everything." My heart pounded. "Who?" But before she could answer, I heard a muffled noise on the other end. A strange sound, like she had dropped the phone. And then, a voice I didn't recognize whispered something low. Then, the call cut off. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, my heart pounding wildly. Someone else was involved in this, and now, I didn't know if my sister ran away or if she was taken. My chest was rising and falling rapidly, my breath coming in shaky bursts. The call had dropped, but my mind kept replaying her last words. She hadn't just left for love. Someone had helped. Someone had been pulling the strings all along. And from the way that call ended, I had a sickening feeling. She wasn't as safe as I thought. I looked at my mother, who was watching me anxiously. What did she say? I swallowed hard, trying to piece it all together. That someone helped them. That someone knew everything. My mother's eyes widened even more. She ran a trembling hand over her face, looking more desperate than before. "You need to forget about this, sweetheart. Don't go after them." Her words hit me like a slap. "What? How can you say that? After everything?" She grabbed my arms, gripping them tightly. "You don't understand. There are things better left undiscovered." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "You know something too, don't you?" Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. I took a step back, feeling the anger burn hotter inside me. My own mother was hiding the truth from me, just like my father, just like my sister. And me? I had been nothing but a pawn in this entire game. But not anymore. I walked out of the house with one thought burning in my mind. I was going to end this. My sister hadn't told me where she was, but she wasn't smart enough to disappear completely. And the first place that came to mind was an old family estate, an isolated house, rarely used except for business meetings and discreet gatherings. I got in the car and drove there without hesitation. The road was dark, the rain starting to fall, making everything feel even more ominous. But nothing would stop me now. When I arrived, the house was mostly dark, except for one light. On the second floor, they were here. I stepped out of the car, heart pounding in my throat. The front door was locked, but I knew this house too well. I slipped around the side and found the back entrance. Unlocked. I stepped inside silently. The air was thick, the scent of damp wood filling the space. Slowly, I climbed the stairs, controlling my breathing. At the top, I heard voices coming from the master bedroom. My sister and someone else. I pressed closer, trying to make out the conversation, but before I could, the door swung open, and there she was. My sister's face twisted in shock. She looked pale, her hair messy, like she hadn't slept in days. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, fear in her voice. Behind her, my fiancé, no, my half-brother, stood up from his chair. His expression was a mix of guilt and frustration. "You followed us?" I let out a dry laugh. "What do you think?" "After everything you did, you really thought I'd just stay put?" My sister swallowed hard. "Please, just leave. You don't understand what's happening." I stepped forward. "Then explain it to me, because I'm not leaving without answers." She glanced at my ex-fiancé, looking nervous. He ran a hand down his face, sighing. "I never wanted it to be like this." His voice was low. "I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. You and her and someone else." "Who?" Their silence told me everything. Someone bigger was pulling the strings. And then, a noise from downstairs. Footsteps. Their eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw something new in them. Fear. My sister grabbed my arm, squeezing it. "You need to hide, now." My whole body tensed. "What? Why? Who's here?" She didn't answer, but when the bedroom door swung open, and I saw who was standing there, my blood ran cold. It was my father, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, a tall man dressed in black stepped calmly into the room. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. "What truth?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. The man smiled. "Your wedding was never about love. It was never about you." My mind reeled. "What do you mean?" He crossed his arms. "You were just a piece in a much bigger game. Your marriage was a business deal." A cold chill ran through me. "A business deal?" The stranger glanced at my father. "Your father owed a lot of money, more than you could imagine." I had never seen him before, but the way he carried himself, the quiet, dangerous energy surrounding him, it made my skin crawl. He looked at me and smiled. A slow, cold smile. Well, looks like we have an unexpected guest." My sister trembled beside me. My father remained silent, but his expression was dark. That's when the stranger spoke again, this time looking directly at me. "I think it's time you learned the whole truth. Your fiancé, or rather your half-brother, was the only way to pay off that debt. A union between families. But of course he didn't know anything about it. And neither did you. Only someone here found out the truth too soon, and they ran." My eyes widened. I turned to my sister, who now looked more terrified than ever. "Is that why you ran?" She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I found out by accident. I was going to tell you, but then he found out too, and we just couldn't stay. They wanted to use us, don't you see? To force us into this." My mind was racing. I turned to my father, feeling my anger rise to dangerous levels. "You were going to sell me off like I was some kind of object?" He didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. And then, I heard it. The unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. The man in black now held a revolver. "And now we have a problem," he said calmly. "You weren't supposed to be here. And secrets like this?" His eyes darkened. "Can't leave this house." My sister squeezed my hand tightly. My father didn't move. My half-brother, the man I thought I loved, looked at me with something like regret. I couldn't believe it. Were they really going to do this? My body went into full alert mode. My palms were sweating. My pulse was erratic. I had two options: wait to be silenced, or fight my way out. And I wasn't going to die here, not without a fight. The silence that followed was deafening. The man in black held the gun steady, his expression unreadable. My father wouldn't even look at me. My sister was trembling beside me, and my ex, my half-brother, seemed lost, like he didn't know which way to turn. My mind worked fast. I needed to get out of here alive. I took a slow, deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. So this is it? The words came out strong, even surprising me. You lied to me my whole life, used me as a bargaining chip, and now you're just going to kill me? The man in black let out a low chuckle. Your intelligence is admirable, but unfortunately, knowing too much comes at a price. He raised the gun. My heart slammed against my ribs. No, I wasn't going to die here. And then, everything happened at once. My sister, maybe out of sheer desperation, lunged at him. The impact made him stumble back, and the gun fired. But the bullet hit the ceiling. I took my chance. I ran for the door. Run! My sister screamed. But I couldn't leave her behind. I grabbed a lamp from the side table and, with every ounce of strength I had left, smashed it against the man's head. He staggered, dazed, and the gun slipped from his hand. Everything was happening in slow motion. My ex-fiancé tackled the man, trying to hold him down. My sister grabbed my arm, her face pale with terror. We need to go. Now. I looked at my father. He still hadn't moved. He was just standing there, like he had accepted this fate. And that's when I realized. He knew this would happen. He had accepted that I would die in this house. A deep, burning rage filled me. You're nothing but a coward. My voice dripped with disgust. He finally looked at me, and for just a second, I saw regret in his eyes. But it was too late. I would never trust him again. I would never trust anyone again. I grabbed the gun off the floor before anyone else could. I turned and glared at them. If anyone tries to stop me, I cocked the revolver. I'll shoot. My sister and I ran down the stairs. We could hear the shouts behind us, but I didn't turn back. The front door was locked, so we sprinted to the kitchen, where there was a side exit. The second we stepped outside, the cold rain slammed into us. My car was too far away, but in the garage, there was another vehicle, a black SUV, keys still in the ignition. They had been so sure they would get rid of me that they hadn't even planned an escape for themselves. Get in, I shouted. My sister threw herself into the passenger seat and I turned the key. The engine roared to life. I slammed my foot on the gas. The headlights cut through the darkness. All I wanted was to get as far away from that house as possible. But I knew. This wasn't over, not even close. We drove for miles without a word. The radio was off. The only sound was the rain pounding against the windshield, and our ragged breathing. Finally, I pulled into a roadside motel. I couldn't go home. Not while my father was still free. We stepped into the small, dimly lit room and locked the door behind us. My hands were still trembling when I placed the gun on the table. My sister collapsed onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. I can't believe this happened. I sank into the chair beside the table, closing my eyes for a moment. They were going to kill us. My voice was cold. I know. He was going to kill me. I opened my eyes and looked straight at my sister. Our own father. She bit her lip, unable to respond. But I knew she had realized it too. Our father wasn't just a man who made a dirty deal. He was a monster. For a while, we sat in silence, the muffled sound of rain the only thing filling the room, until my sister finally spoke hesitantly. What do we do now? I lifted my gaze to her. I used to be the perfect daughter, the one who followed the rules, the one who trusted her family, the one who believed in love. But that version of me had died in that church. And the woman who had taken her place wanted revenge. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd use. After a few seconds, the call was answered. I need your help, I said, no hesitation. The voice on the other end chuckled softly. I figured this day would come. I took a deep breath. I want to destroy him. My father, my family, all of them. A brief silence. Then, the person on the line exhaled. So you've finally woken up to the truth. I looked at my sister. She watched me in silence, waiting for my decision. And right there, in that cheap motel room, I knew what had to be done. Yes. And I won't stop until they pay for everything. The person on the line sighed. Then let's begin. I hung up the phone. And for the first time that night, I smiled. This war was just beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like to support our work. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more thrilling stories like this. And of course, share your thoughts in the comments. We want to know what you think.